Andrew Humphreys. Hello there.
Hi, nice to be here. It's my first experience of a DLF event, and I'm really looking forward to hearing everybody's questions and to meeting everybody. So thank you for inviting me to say a few words today.
Well, thanks for joining us, Andrew. I'm really looking forward to hearing more. I suppose to kick off with, I'd just like to know a little bit more about the bakery, what the bakery is, what the bakery does, and what you do at the bakery.
Sure. Well, it's I'm one of the co-founders of the bakery. We came up with this crazy idea back in 2012 that there are lots of large corporations around the world that want to do things in a different way, that have particular challenges or issues that they need to solve. There's this wealth of solutions around the world in the startup ecosystem. You know, as we all know, we live in a world full of entrepreneurs. Apparently 100 million new startups every year created around the world, everybody building new technologies and everybody wanting to understand how small, underfunded, poorly resourced teams can build incredible new things that seem to resonate with an audience really well, whereas corporates who should have all the knowledge and expertise and resources seem to struggle to get those new things to market. So how can large corporates really benefit from collaboration and working with and like the startup ecosystem? And we created what was called the world's first challenge-led accelerator. It's a terrible statement, but I think it was KPMG that called us that. The idea was finding corporate challenges that could potentially be solved by pre-existing solutions that existed in the startup world, and then matching those together. Now, back in 2012, that was a pretty cool insight. Nowadays, everybody does it. So every large consultancy has a corporate startup kind of matchmaking solution, and lots of people are doing it. And of course, many corporates run their own programs, and I'm sure many of the DLF members have their own startup garages or foundries or factories or whatever they are, to help corporates try and understand how to solve problems using the startup ecosystem.
Brilliant. Well, look, I know also we have Nicolina Glamochtia from LV waiting in the wings alongside you, Andrew. I'm going to hand over to you and ask you to tell us a bit more about how you work together, maybe show us some examples of what goes on, and then I'll catch up with you very soon. But yeah, Andrew and Nicolina, over to you.
Thanks, Clive. So when I was asked to come along and talk about agility, it was quite an interesting topic, because as most of us know, the word agile, can we be agile? It's a bit of a buzzword, and even listening to or reading some of the comments that people have made in response to the question that Clive asked at the beginning shows that, yeah, we can be more, let's call it nimble. We want to be more nimble as an organization and do things faster. But does that actually mean we're being agile? The whole concept of agile was developed 15 years ago, and it was a way of developing new software in a different way, or new technology in a different way, using sprints to do things very, very quickly, less documentation, less planning, more responsive to specific problems, and getting product or solutions, technology into the hands of users quicker to gauge their response and then iterate it to make sure that you're delivering a clear solution, as opposed to the way software had really been built before, which was, let's think about what it is that we need, create a massive plan, build something that might take ages, and then launch it when it's finished. And that's the only time it really got into the hands of users, when, of course, by then it was too late to change. And if users didn't like it, it kind of failed. So this was a process that was developed really to make sure that software could be built and delivered in a way that lowered the risk of making sure that people would use it and make it work. Now, can you make a corporate or a business more agile? That's probably a different question. It's, how do we use those thought processes and those methodologies to make us as an organization more collaborative, try and figure out what works first and what works best, and get real user feedback early, and then iterate and change direction. That's quite a difficult thing for large organizations to do. You probably all know that, large businesses tend to be regarded as super tankers. You can't change direction quickly. So, the whole concept of agile in a large corporation, is anathema, really. It doesn't really work. So, in some ways, part of what we were trying to do when we created the bakery was introduce corporations and teams within corporations to how they could think in slightly different ways, think in the ways that entrepreneurs might. Now, that's fine, but it doesn't work for everything. And I think, like the whole of life, there's a balance. If you're building a hospital, trying to build a hospital in an agile way might be quite tricky. And you might not end up with anything that really delivers, great value at the end. But because really what you should do when you're building a hospital is think of a plan, and create it and build it and execute it, and take the risk that, it might not be 100% perfect, but it'll be delivered to time, it'll do the function. However, if you're launching a new brand or a new product, something that you want to test to see if it works, then agile methodologies might be much, much better, and allow you to lower the risk that the brand might not resonate with potential customers. So I think that this whole concept of agile, and also the other question is, are we talking about agile capital A, i.e. the methodology, or agile with a small a? How can we be more, I'll use the word nimble. How can we be better as a business and do things quicker in a slightly different way? And in our little breakout group, we were talking about how, isn't it incredible that, we've all as large organizations, been able to move to this new way of working. Whereas if you had to plan it, in advance, it would have taken years. We've actually managed to do it in a few weeks. So it's quite interesting. I want to give an example. And you mentioned, Clive, that we've been working with LV, and Nicolina is going to talk about what being agile in an insurance sector means, and that's going to be fascinating. And I've really enjoyed working with Nicolina and her team and seeing what they've been able to achieve in pretty traditional sector, and working in that way with her. But rather than talk about that particular example, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to talk about a particular case study, which is far enough away from us so that I can talk about some of the detail, because a lot of DLF members are actually customers of ours, but also in an environment where you might think, well, how can you change this? This is amazing. So it gives us a really good insight into how using an agile way of working or a different way of thinking has enabled a large corporate to change the way that they do things. So we were working with a very large organization called Gruppo Pizzolato. Now, probably most of you won't have heard of this. Gruppo Pizzolato is a multi-billion-pound construction company. They operate in a state of Brazil called Minas Gerais. Again, many of you may not have heard of that. Minas Gerais is the third largest state in Brazil. To give you an idea, it's got an area the size of France, physical geographical area about the same size as France, and population about the same size as Australia. About 22 million people live in Minas. One of the big issues with in Brazil, and the whole of Brazil, particularly in Minas, is social housing. And Gruppo Pizzolato is an organization that historically has built large construction sites, blocks of flats, but also large single story housing environments that they have typically bidded to government to sell to, and then constructed those over a period of time, and then government will provide the social housing to the end users using rent. Gruppo Pizzolato felt that this whole model could be improved upon. So working with them, we started to try and understand what the real issue was in social housing. And part of the problem was that many people in Brazil who take advantage of social housing don't really register on any kind of Experian-like or financial background environment. Most of them, work 3 or 4 different jobs, often paid in cash, and it's very difficult for them to really prove their finance worthiness, even though their rent payment is the most important thing to them, and it's the thing that they make them first, and they're actually very good at making their rent payments, like most of us. So how could Gruppo Pizzolato solve this issue that they had? We talked about different ways. We sat down in various scrums with different people around the business, trying to understand whether there was a new model that could be created here. And we have a process which we call Startup as a Service, which allows large corporates to actually create startups within themselves. And so the idea was to create a new business. It's called Bem Nosso. I don't know how your Portuguese is. Mine's terrible. Bem Nosso means our good, direct translation. It sort of means good for us all, is kind of what the real translation of it is. And the idea behind Bem Nosso as a technology, as a startup, was to enable people who might want social housing to apply to qualify for an apartment, and show how they could pay the rent. And actually Pizzolato would not just give them an apartment and take their rent, but they would make that rent payment into a lease mortgage payment. So over time, people who otherwise wouldn't actually be able to qualify could actually own their own property. And by doing this, Pizzolato disintermediated the government. In other words, they're now able to sell their properties directly to their end users by using technology that we help them build using different startups. And the thing about startups is they're really good at one particular thing. So actually, in building Bem Nosso, we brought in a number of different startups. One that was really good at analyzing financial health of people where there was no records. Another that used AI to try and understand their long-term capability. And yet another that used chatbot functionality. So by bringing in 3 different startups, we were able to create a brand new product in literally a few months, and launched Bem Nosso within a year. So by building this new product, not only have Gruppo Pizzolato created a whole new market for themselves, they've actually been able to make more margin, more profit by avoiding the cost of, or the minimum cost of working with the government. And they're disrupting the environment in Brazil by helping thousands of families now to own their own affordable housing, which they could never have aspired to before. So this new way of thinking, this new way of building technology, and thinking about the problem that you're solving for the customer, has been really transformational in this environment. Now, we've done this a number of times. This is a construction, a fintech really, in the construction sector. But we've built new brands for FMCG companies. We're building new skincare brands for organizations. We're building new finance companies. And we're even doing this in the mining sector, and disrupting the mining sector. So it is true that by thinking differently, by thinking about the customer problem, by doing things in an iterative and agile way, and getting product out into the hands of your customer early, rather than doing lots of early stage planning, you can actually create amazing new technologies, even in a very large traditional kind of environment. And I guess that's what's so exciting about the potential of agile development and this new way of working. And I'm going to hand over to Nicolina. We've been working together for about a year, Nicolina, and I'm really interested to hear what you think about how changing the way a large organization like LV and changing the way you think how that journey has been for you, and what are the challenges as well?
So I've joined LV about 2 years ago. I was brought in specifically because I have no insurance background, so to actually see how can we reimagine the industry. So the leadership team kind of wanted really to see what are the experiences from the other industries in digital, and how can we meet those new consumer demands which are set by the leaders in other industries, not necessarily insurance, because insurance obviously hasn't really moved on for decades since price comparison websites came to the fruition. So since I've joined, I've been looking at how can we create new products and services that are digital first, but also how can we improve on the existing. And it's been really challenged to see how can we move our I guess tanker-ship because there is so much legacy, there is so much processes, so any even smallest change takes I think we have a few team members in the session today as well, they will know from design team, it takes maybe even years to deliver on. So we've been looking at how can we create new models and how can we meet much faster, how can we understand those customer demands, what they really mean, and obviously and address unmet demands for our customers. And in that process, I've been really looking at what are the different methodologies we can apply internally and the change we can apply to actually drive this forward. So in the course of that, obviously now with COVID-19, we've seen tremendous acceleration of agility and decisions made that have never been made before. So decisions that would normally take 2 years and programs of work or multiple years, you know, we've seen happen in weeks. So that now all our workforce is remotely working, including our call centers and claims agents, and really delivering that great customer service to our customers, as well as launch of many online tools and adoption of those tools as well, from across the board, across the age span, age groups, which not necessarily have been digital before. So my challenge now is also how do we actually keep that momentum, and how do we make that sustainable going forward. We have in the process also launched more flexible and new products and propositions we're not really talking about yet, because really it's not a time that we should market things out, but really it just shows that we've been developing things that market really needs, because if your car is parked now on your driveway and you're not really using it, you need much more flexible offering than what you did in the past when you had a general, annual insurance. So, at some of the future sessions, maybe we can talk about that. But specifically how we worked with the bakery was really interesting because, obviously I was a one-person band when I joined, so I needed some help to drive this. And we could take it so much internally. So we really looked in the market, who can help us kind of look at these new concepts, how can we test them fast, and how can we take them to the market fast. And we came across bakery, who really, if you kind of have a pitch, you don't really understand it till you talk to them. My CEO said, well, they're nothing but a matchmaking business. I think was the first reaction, which wasn't quite true. So we've started working, I think, in the autumn last year. We've looked at, we've given bakery a challenge to look at the new market and what are all the different services a customer would need to actually have a life cycle of events covering, from the purchase and consideration through to the renewal. And the bakery kind of enabled us to look at and inspire us to look at the whole spectrum of solutions that could address those customer needs in quite different ways. So if I'm saying to somebody I'm from an insurance company, they always, match me up with insurtechs or financial institutions or financial startups. We've been looking at the different companies who address the same program. Maybe they don't bake the bread, but they might be completely different industry or addressing different problems somewhere else. So that inspiration was really great to kind of help us zoom in on the areas that we think are not really addressed in the market, by anybody, and to really think in innovative way to solve those problems. And then we've actually done a trial with 2 startups. In 4 weeks, we actually tested the solutions and the concepts with almost 3,000 customers, which enabled us, in fact, to then define what do we want to take forward and de-risk our investment, which is happening now. So I just say, watch this space. We're going to be launching something soon. But this really rapidly enabled us to kind of test the true solution with the people, and actually now we are delivering it to be going live. So
I think one of the things that's really impressed me about the way you've looked at it, and often we get called in to solve specific problems that our client perceives is the issue. We don't sell enough of this product. Can you help us sell more of this? And that's really an internal client problem. And surely, there are solutions to those kinds of things. But I think the thing that's really impressed me about the way LV has gone around it is it's very much been looking at it from a customer-centric perspective. And Agile is great, and this new way of working is great at solving those kinds of issues and getting, being able to test things really quickly and put them in the hands of users really quickly and get a quick response, so that you can then change your mind, iterate, figure out what the real problem is that you're solving, and then build a solution that helps you solve that problem. And I think that's a great example of how we've been able to do that with LV.